folks on the...
We do. The two folks that are on, could you please identify who you are?
Nope.
A little creepy. Who would be on that won't identify themselves?
I don't know. It's a public meeting, but I would assume that they would at least identify who they are.
If you're trying to identify yourself, you might be on mute. Just
Yeah.
worth a shot.
I'll also text Dylan.
Oh,
Hey,
there's
there's
Dean.
Dean.
Here.
Morning.
Morning, guys. We saved
We
the
have a
quorum.
You saved our
I just like to be that just-in-time person, right? So,
Yeah, just let a little pressure mount and then come in.
well, Paul, I wish I would have caught you there and be in person, but it worked out because I think I'm stretched across every direction I can possibly be at this point. So
No problem. I was just telling Wes, as soon as this is done, I got to hit the road and try to get to Three Forks or Bozeman for another team's meeting.
there you go.
So I feel your pain. But well, I think we now have a quorum. I'll bring the meeting to order. Appreciate everybody making the time today to cover this. I think this is going to be a really important discussion as we roll into our full SWIB meeting in Great Falls in a couple weeks. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dean second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Think there are any? So with that, Wes sent out with the agenda a red line version of the bylaws. Lieutenant Governor Juris has gone through these, made a number of changes. It really, I think, tightens up the document substantially and adds some clarity, especially on board continuity. Did everybody get a chance to take a look at those? Okay.
Yes.
Looks like we've got one more person that may have just joined. Can you please identify yourself?
And within those, a couple of things that she wanted to highlight were just making sure that it was also consistent with the federal law. We also had a couple of items that didn't quite point back to one another. There has been a removal of a couple of pieces. That's why I did want to at least send to you the redacted version that you could see, and then there is a final version as part of the bylaws. And in this review, it is noted that the executive committee will review and approve whether or not the full board should review and approve the bylaws. So that's why we're here today reviewing those. Do any of you have any questions about the bylaws?
Dean.
Yeah, Chair and Wes, I just had a quick question around, the gender neutrality language changes. The governor or his or her designee. Just a personal thing I've been working on over the past couple of years is to remove the his and her and put a there. Not sure if it's worth a additional change or anything that way, but our past history with some of our stuff was we added the his or her in, and then years later went back and changed it to completely neutral opportunities within that. So just an idea so that we maybe don't have to look at it later down the road is I think you got section 201.1 here. One of those opportunities. I don't know if we need to look at this as we're changing it now, but would throw it out for a suggestion.
Okay.
I would have to go back to her. I don't know if it would be, I would take your your all's leadership on that. What I will say is the old bylaws were his, period. So this is further than it was, because they were just his. But
You got, and again, guys, just a suggestion there that if we were changing them at this point, should we discuss, you know, their versus his and her designation?
Yeah.
And if I can talk on this topic, Dean, I totally understand what you're saying, but I think for the sake of getting this approved and done, it would be nice not to have to go back to the lieutenant governor for approval when it's something that, to your point, I mean, you're correct, but
Yep.
it's
Yep,
not
no,
one of the ones worth fighting for.
I completely understand, and so I would retract my suggestion here.
I think you make a good point, Dean, in the sense that if we think about these bylaws, it's probably something that every couple of years we should just revisit anyway and open the door for, you know, updating as, you know, as maybe should the governor redefine mission? Should we rethink about, you know, the SWIB purpose? Probably have that opportunity every once in a while.
Yeah, probably a good note to say the next time we review is to maybe look at that opportunity to put it in front all at once for that change for the future. Thank you.
So any other comments, questions on the red line bylaws? So I think
No.
our mission today is really the point is to really approve, reject, or table moving this forward for full board action in
I'd make a
couple
motion.
of weeks.
I'd make a motion that we approve it for board review.
Great, thanks,
I
Adam.
second that.
Thanks, Lori. Any further discussion? It seems so formal with just like 4 of us on the phone. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, and we will discuss this in Great Falls. I guess the next topic, Adam, you might be spotlighted here, and Wes is going to be spotlighted too. We don't have Mike, unless Mike McGinley, have you just joined us by chance? Okay, looks like we got one more person that joined the call. Again, I'll ask anybody that's on the call, if you please identify yourself if you don't have your cameras on.
Hi, this is Dylan Clapmeyer. Sorry I'm late. I got tied up in the budget office.
Perfect. Thanks, Dylan. So the next agenda item, what I was really hoping to do is just get some color and visit a little bit about your individual committee meetings. And I might, if it's okay, Adam, I'll start with you. In going through the notes, I really enjoyed your committee meetings notes. I mean that you know, I'll kind of restate now formally that the discussion that you had between you and Brock regarding the you know, collaboration needed between workforce and education, then Brock's comments later. What a great conversation, and it really kind of highlighted, I think, the value in getting these smaller committee groups to be more focused. So I guess I'll just turn it over to you if you want to just add some color on the meeting, your thoughts, and then we'll roll into goals next time.
Yeah. Wes, can you share the notes by any chance?
yeah, and as I've mentioned too, as soon as I can get that recording, I can finish them. But there were some items that weren't. I don't have a copy of them because they aren't public yet because I haven't been able to approve them without that recording.
Oh, got it. I don't have a copy of them, so it would be helpful to reference. I see you do.
I'm a hard copy guy today.
Yeah, right. You know,
Sorry, Adam, those are the only ones I don't have. Until I have that recording, I can't clarify a couple of items.
okay. Well, I promise I'll never set a Teams meeting up in my company's Teams. I'll always have you do it for
Yes.
meetings going forward. So, you know, I think we went and perhaps I need a little bit of guidance from you, Mr. Chair, on, we had a number of folks that were very active in our meeting that weren't on our subcommittee, which was fine. It was a public meeting, but how to best navigate that. Mary Heller was a pretty good example. And I mean, she had some really good participation pieces, but she's not on the committee. So how we kind of navigate that process, I think I'd like some guidance from you on, and what's the best route there. So,
You know, I guess I'll practice what I'm going to say with this meeting. That at times I'll open it up for public comment, but then, you know, outside of those moments for public comment, it really becomes a discussion for just the committee. And it's just as a formal way to kind of rein it in if you need to. Now, I think the committees, having people willing to be on the phone from the public is a good thing.
Agreed.
It shows some interest in what we're doing, but yeah, you can time can slip away real quick if the door is permanently open. I don't know if that helps out.
It does, and probably helpful to just have that in Great Falls and some of that conversation. Hey, there was nothing wrong, and there was no need to shut it down, but it was quite evident that she was very engaged in the process. So,
yeah.
I think big picture overall, we started with reviewing the goals of the board. I thought that was important as we kind of started the conversation, and then I asked each of the board members or the committee members to kind of two questions. One, what challenges exist in your community and businesses for the workforce, and what opportunities exist that the committee should consider to improve workforce readiness and employability in Montana. And we really just had a kind of a wide-ranging discussion along those two topics. And some good back and forth about the role of education in preparing the workforce, the partnership with industry in that process, and some of the demands that that are out there of how do we marry the two effectively without creating competing interests in that process. And I think we and I don't have them in front of me, the notes, because I went to Europe the next day and I just got back. So sorry. So
Priorities.
yeah, I know. We set 2 or 3 goals, and I don't know if you've got them there.
I do, and I can read them. Adam, if it helps. So the first goal in the meeting was short-term credentials with graded funding for students to earn.
Okay. Yep.
The second one, building a pipeline for students to utilize work-based learning. 3, a message to industry is to be involved. Show the investment from the state and employers to buy in to fix workforce shortages. 4, connection to CTSO teachers. And 5 was a question: where are families in the thought process of students and careers?
Yeah. Yep. That's kind of going to guide us for the the short term here on those efforts. I did, and I'm going to make the plug here again. We did have a little bit of a conversation around how do we encourage more military veterans to come to Montana, and had a little conversation around the fact that we're now about one of 5 states in the union that tax retirement for pay for retirees. And it's an area I think we ought to be competitive with the rest of the country on, if we're going to hope to bring those potential workers who have much to offer Montana and the country to the state. So that one didn't make our list, but you made me the chair, and I'm going to keep harping on it. So.
If I can add something, Adam, if you don't mind. One of the pieces that came out of that was a desire to seek additional funding for credentialing. And correct me if I'm misspeaking at all. And so with that, we are requesting a waiver from the U.S. Department of Labor as it is. We've been working on it for a while, and OPI just got me their document last week for a youth waiver to allow for 50% of youth funding to go toward in-school youth. Right now, only 25% can be spent on in-school youth. This is all a request, of course. Nothing's in stone until they approve it. Along with that, to utilize WIOA youth funding for credentialing for in-school youth, we have to request a second waiver. And they can't be a part of the same waiver. It has to be two, and they are in concert with one another. So I've worked with our federal project officer, and then I have created that second waiver. I'm waiting on some data from OCHI, visited with them last week, and they're just waiting to get me some information. Once I have that, I can send it out to the group of us internally that have been working on that waiver, and I'll update the full board on that as well. But what that could mean is OCHI utilizing their 1-2 free program, so where they will pay for 2 courses, the legislature will pay for 2 courses of a student to complete dual enrollment. If we set some boundaries, for example, WIOA youth funding could be spent on possibly 2 more courses. Well, if the majority of credentialing is 5 to 7 courses, it would get them there. Additionally, they could also use adult funding once they turn 18 to possibly pay for the additional 2 or 3 courses that they may need. What that could mean is when a student does graduate from high school through OCHI and Department of Labor and Industry, they would be able to pay for a full credential, an industry recognized credential, at the same time as they graduate from high school. So we're working on those. It'll be sent out to the full group as soon as I get that data from OCHI. I just didn't want to send it out with some missing pieces in it. So, and then I'll update the board on that and where it stands with those of us that are working on it internally. I'll update you all in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Adam, on that topic of Montana state taxation of veteran retirement benefits, do you know, is it federally taxed? State. I mean, but is it taxed federally, and then the states are electing to or not to apply their state taxes?
Not being a retiree, I don't know. Probably
Okay.
could know that question. I was specifically referring to the taxes, the state tax levels, because all the states around us and a number of states, we are not competitive if you're looking at it as a military retiree.
Yeah. So is this something that would you be willing, if we when we bring this up relative to goals at the in Great Falls, to kind of throw on the table and talk about? I mean, it kind of goes to it. And Dylan, if I could kind of bring you in on this. I don't want to speak for the governor, but I'd like your thoughts. If I think about all of the, especially regarding taxation, during the last legislative session, the governor, I mean, it doesn't appear, he's been very focused on trying to create Montana competitiveness vis-a-vis neighboring states via tax policy. And might this be something that there could be some interest generated both from increasing the supply of workforce kind of through a competitiveness function?
Is this, are you talking just about the taxing veterans benefits, or sorry, did I miss something else there?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Yeah.
Okay.
I just kind of wanted your take on it as we roll into Great Falls. If this comes up for a broader discussion at the SWIB, is maybe a quick hit win for the governor and for the state of Montana.
Yeah, I'm interested in this. I haven't heard about this tax issue specifically, but we had a policy meeting last week, and I know that there's been general interest in seeing what we can do to support veterans and military families, and of course how we could tie workforce development into that. Glenn Opal, who's my supervisor, the governor's policy director, Glenn Opal is in charge of all of the governor's tax policy in coordination with the budget director. So I will check on this with Glenn to see if it's on their radar. Obviously, everything with our tax reform packages has to be balanced. So I'll see if where this could fit in or if they've talked about it. The other thing, I'm interested if you guys have any suggestions on tax reform in general, I'm interested. We're hoping to get data soon from revenue on how much the MTech tax credit was utilized. I'm afraid it wasn't very heavily utilized just on what I'm hearing from the field. And so I want to know like why that is and what we can do to make it better. Maybe it's just a marketing thing. And then, the governor's going to be up at RDO in Whitefish this week talking about the business equipment tax and how we can continue to make progress in eliminating that for small businesses. But again, I'm not the direct lead on all that stuff. Glenn is, but I'd love to loop him in if you have ideas.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I'm sorry, Chair. I think it's very important though that as we talk about this, that we do directly tie it to the workforce needs and shortages. As you talk about retiree benefits, a lot of people, their minds go to, well, that they're exiting the workforce, right? So we're just there's a huge untapped market of retired veterans that still have a time frame to bridge.
Yeah.
And that's the correlation with the Workforce Innovation Board is that there's an untapped market available with these, and if we can attract them to our state, we can employ them.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think there is a great direct correlation with that and that drive.
Yeah, I think we're gonna SkillBridge is on. If I'm not mistaken, Wes is on the agenda.
I'm hoping so. I haven't heard. I've reached out a number of times to the corporal. I can't remember what his title is. Colonel up at Malmstrom, who Representative Buttry asked me to reach out to. I haven't heard back from him. So
I mean, I was just thinking if that was going to come up, it'd be just a wonderful kind of segue into that discussion. But if I think about any state that has military bases, when you first started talking about this, I was thinking about that incremental worker coming into this state from a supply perspective, but it may also serve from a workforce perspective from a retention standpoint. If you've got people that, they retire out in Great Falls, it'd be another tool to, I guess it'd be another economic incentive for them to stay in the state of Montana versus, going to an adjacent state. So great comment and discussion.
Yep.
Anything else, Adam, that you'd like to talk about?
No, I think it would be good, as we start looking at these goals, wanting to make sure, and maybe Dylan, this is a conversation with you and Wes, is making sure what we're moving forward aligns with what the governor and your team want us to be working on. I mean, we're certainly gonna give you feedback, but I certainly don't want to run headlong into something that doesn't make sense. So
yeah, I think you guys have a legislative committee. What I think we should do is maybe sometime later this month, or early next month at the latest, if like Aaron and I or John and I, whoever's appropriate from the commissioner's office, maybe we just sit down and kind of talk about the legislation that we're looking at and get some initial feedback just to make sure everyone's aligned.
yeah.
Yes, I would be very interested.
That would be great.
Hey, Paul, one thing I'd like to mention is based on Adam's priorities or goals for his committee is that, and I know this is easier said than done, but it sounds like you're already doing a good job bringing in Ochi and Brock, and of course we have OPI, but we all need to be aligned. And I'm going to be honest, I think we got off to a rocky start giving money to Accelerate Montana because I think Ochi took it as they should have gotten that money. And I think Accelerate Montana has done a really good job of bringing them in. But we do need to focus on that K-12 pipeline. And not all those kids go to college. So it's nothing against them, but we have to serve those kids. But then we also have to figure out what are the ways we can work with Ochi and, what are the opportunities with WIOA and youth funding. So I think we just all need to kind of keep working on that and reiterating the message that we all really need to be on the same team. We're not trying to pit one against another. And again, I get it. It's political. It's easier said than done. But I mean, that would be my goal.
And I think it might be a little more challenging moving forward with Ochi because Brock just accepted a new role. Are you aware of that, Commissioner?
Oh, no,
He's the new president of Northern Michigan University beginning February 1st.
Oh, no.
But I have visited with Jackie Treester over at Ochi, and she's who's helping me with the data for the youth waiver, and she's committed to keeping us as apprised to things as possible. And I will continue to stay in communication with them there as well.
Yeah, well, thanks, Wes. Again, it's just, trying to reach out and let them know that we really should all be on the same page to the extent we can.
No, I agree. I appreciate those comments, Lori. I mean, I don't live in a political world, so my comments could be incredibly naive. But when I think about it from a workforce, especially from a business perspective, K through whatever that terminal degree is, whether it's 12, whether it's 12 in a certificate, 2-year schooling, or a 4-year in advanced, to me, artificial disruptions in the continuum don't make sense. I mean, it from a workforce development perspective. So I completely agree with your comments, and if that's something that the SWIB can help facilitate, we need to do that. I mean, that break between, I'll just say OPI and OCHI, that's a structural issue, but it doesn't change the fact that that's a learning continuum from K through whatever that terminal education level is. So I appreciate your comments, and I agree with what you said. We need to keep all that synced up.
And Accelerate Montana will be presenting, Paul is going to present to the SWIB, just an update as well.
Oh, great.
In 2 weeks, and so hopefully that'll be helpful to your comments as well, Commissioner. Well, I can go through the next one since I wasn't able to attend the WIOA committee meeting, but I talked with Commissioner McGinley and others. They kind of more so were just had some questions, and it was more of a conversation from what I understand. I joined the very, very end. There was Commissioner McGinley still sits on the NACO Workforce Committee, so the National Association of Counties. And so he's a little more apprised to kind of what was happening in Washington, D.C. Wants, though, to make sure that within our next state plan and within our planning processes, there's a greater emphasis on job quality for healthy business, new and expanded programs for employer engagement, broader planning required to anticipate economic shifts, and then a focus on business engagement. And I do think that we're doing a better job of that too with our restructure, what's going on. We'll have some of those items covered. I think for the goals for the WIOA committee, what I would take away from the broader conversation is including them more in the next state plan conversation. I came in at the very kind of beginning, but also at the end. Shouldn't have been the end, or shouldn't have been the beginning, but was the beginning, and also the end of the state plan modification process. And moving forward, would like to include that committee a lot more with outside perspectives versus just OPI, just DLI, and making sure that we have some business participation. With the recent appointments that Chair Hopfov has made, we have a full WIOA committee with majority business members. And so that I think will be more helpful. And I will be asking a number of them to help with that conversation, that planning process as we move forward, along with the full board. So that's kind of what I would take away as far as goals are concerned.
Hey, Wes, looking at the minutes, was there a definite goal around developing an analysis or a survey for business partners?
That was something that they had talked about. Again, I wasn't part of the full conversation of that, and it wasn't recorded. But they wanted that. Sometimes what I've learned from some of the committee conversations is some of the requests that are made are already happening. And it's better, how do we utilize the data and information we already have? We do employer surveys, and how do we utilize that data to get at the requests of the committees versus sending out our own information? And that's one of them. We have some of that data I just don't think they know we have it. So how do we share it with them? And that to me is more about the state planning process for the next state plan for 2024.
Okay. Would it, so when we, for the purpose of the next discussion, we don't need to make the decision now, that's a different agenda point, but just to ask, could a goal be created based on that discussion, trying to preserve what they have? Again, we can talk about it in the Great Falls, but something like develop, analyze, and or utilize existing surveys for business partners that,
Surveys and data.
data.
That exists versus, and if they want something, asking for it, not thinking that they automatically have to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, perfect. And I like the involvement in the state plan process, and that's good to get.
Any questions about that one from folks? From what I would hope to utilize committee members and committee work for, the WIOA committee will be much busier around state plan time, and probably less busy other times. And same with the workforce policy committee, maybe busier with policy development and or session time, but slower at other times.
And in fairness, the WIOA committee, that's a tough one. I sat on that for a number of years, and Dean, you probably did too. It's very much a compliance type structure. I mean, you're approving policies, approving things that need to be approved for the next meeting. It's, one-stop shop agreements, all those type of things that you have to go through. It's just part of the requirement of WIOA.
Hey, Wes.
Yes.
We were at the NASWA conference last week, and there was some talk about like easing up on some of the WIOA restrictions. Not sure if you've heard anything about that. Maybe check in with Roy, but I didn't sit in on that session, but I was trying to be hopeful.
Well, he has told us too, the takeaway was, yes, WIOA can. That was the tagline that they're trying to utilize. I don't know if I believe it in my conversations with federal partners, because the compliance has been more strict than ever before. You're aware of that because I've had to come to you for a number of things that has never been even looked at before. So I think that there's a message of, yes, they want to ease up, but in reality, I haven't seen it. We'll see with these two waivers. What I will say is they've been very helpful in crafting and offering guidance in crafting the waivers. We're also reviewing our allocation policy that will be brought to the full board in 2 weeks. And they've been helpful with wanting to help with that. So there's a level of wanting to provide good service, but as far as the actual compliance, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay.
But I appreciate that, and I hope that that is the case, because it sure has not been. I'm just taking some notes here too.
Any further questions or comments on the WIOA committee meeting?
Just encourage Mike to keep up with it, as he's kind of our resident historian as the development and move through all of that over the years. So he's a great wealth of knowledge for a lot of it.
Absolutely.
He is. The Workforce Policy Committee, the goals, that coordination of service, coordination of data. It was interesting. One of the big topics that came away from it was licensing and licensing reciprocity. I sent that out to the board and encouraged you all to maybe just the committee. I sent it to the committee, excuse me, because they had asked for it. They were hoping to legislatively encourage licensing reciprocity. And I said, before we do that, the Department of Labor and Industry is the entity for that. I met with the deputy administrator over licensing and encouraged all of the committee members to add public comment to what is going on with licensing. With Commissioner Esau's leadership, there is an easing of some of that and a request. So I encourage them all to add public comment if they see fit. And within that, it would essentially allow more flexibility to allow folks that come from other states to start working in Montana much sooner than they do now. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, but that's kind of the overall message of that, is that we are working toward that. There may be a legislative fix, and it is on the legislative docket to fix some of that.
Yeah, and would it make sense to have somebody from Eric's shop give a little proposal of the Title 37 reform we're doing, just so everybody's at least aware of what we're proposing? And then, because right now we're doing a lot of outreach just to get feedback. So, I mean, it might be a nice opportunity for the board to give us feedback.
And I talked with David, is who I had met with, and we talked about that, and and Barb agreed as well, was to maybe come back to the board after the legislative session to give an update on what has been done. But if you see that we do it ahead of time, yes, I'm happy to reach back out to him and ask if he will attend.
Yeah, let me talk to them. I just think it might be helpful if that is actually something that the board wants to consider, that we talk to them now about what we're proposing versus, oh, we'll talk to you after session.
Well, and I had sent it out to the committee to add their public comment and gave some context to it. So they have all, at the committee level, have been able to, I don't know if they have, but have the opportunity to add their public comment and learn more about it. And it was just kind of we had internally agreed, and David had as well, that we maybe have a conversation after session about, we did fix something like this if it's approved, if it's voted and approved by the governor. But I'm happy to ask him as well. Would you like to lead that, or would you like me to reach out to David and ask if he would be willing to talk about Title 37?
Well, I guess for the other board members, would it be helpful to have somebody come and give a half hour of what we're proposing?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it would.
Okay.
The licensing issue comes up so often in discussion, so that'd be fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, Wes, I'm happy to reach out, and I'll just include you.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing that. So that was one of the big things that came up, and I said before we go too far down this road, I think that learning more about what's going on is helpful. Otherwise, the conversation also went into making sure that people are able to live here, not just work here. And part of that is with the reciprocity. Again, it all kept coming back to that. The board, or the committee, excuse me, had also showed interest in wanting to help with the red tape task force and make recommendations. I don't know how to proceed with that, but that was just something that they had offered to be helpful with. And then they also had questions about Department of Revenue, and David was going to reach out to both Revenue and Commerce to possibly speak at the next meetings to see how the board could be more contributive to those two state departments as far as the SWIB is concerned. So it was kind of very high level strategy thinking. There wasn't a lot of specific goals except for the licensing reciprocity that came out from that. So, and then there were some questions also about demographics, and I shared information that Barb had provided to ensure that they all know where to find that demographic information and how to utilize it. Haven't heard back from any of them whether or not they want more information, but that's what they had asked for.
So one question, and I think it makes sense that if we think about goals, that the majority of the goals are going to sit on your committee, Adam, the workforce upskill, training, education. I mean, that just seems like such a natural fit for opportunities to move the needle, where, you know, we always it's a legislative act that is being administered and followed, and the policy committee is more of a tool and a resource to help drive maybe some of those opportunities on the training, education, upskill front. So, I mean, it makes sense that there'd be more goals on the first committee we talked about. But one thought that comes to mind, and might pick on you again, Dylan, but if we think about the SWIB as a resource, and we've got a broad group of people from across the state in multiple industries, private, government, different agencies. Is there an opportunity to, I guess, just to offer it as a goal? I'll just posit something like coordinate with the governor's office regarding legislative support. I mean, could the SWIB be a resource when it comes to some legislation, we get into the session where there needs to be, whether it's testimony, some level of support for things that are on that agenda for the governor that could move the needle on the workforce front?
Yes, there is. So we can try and coordinate that as much as possible ahead of time with the governor's key, I guess this isn't the official name, but his Agenda 2.0, his top priority legislation. Anywhere that you think there is a role for the SWIB as a whole, or for individual members of the SWIB to maybe come give their own individual testimony, I would love to coordinate that. As you know, though, outside of the governor's main agenda items, there's going to be a lot of like good things and bad things coming, and it's going to be fluid.
Yeah.
And we're really not going to know, until the legislature gets started, until bills get assigned to committees. It's going to have to be kind of fluid on those things that are outside of his core agenda. If there are things that the SWIB sees that might be beneficial, but that are not in the governor's core agenda, but we still want to try and advance, please flag those for me. Let's talk about those things. But I think we're going to have to be a little bit fluid with it.
Okay, and I guess is it possible when you visit with Glenn Opel to, if I think about that committee especially during session, and I know we've got a couple legislators on that committee, they're going to be plenty busy on their own with the session, but as just the offer of could that committee in the SWIB be used as a resource, at his discretion? I mean, if as it relates to workforce things that pop up during the session. I mean, I guess I just was wondering if there's a way we could offer our assistance for what it's worth.
Yeah.
It may help define that a little bit, but
I think the best way to do that might be for me, Wes, and Aaron. So I imagine me, Wes, and Aaron will be monitoring everything very closely, so we can just try and flag things for that committee as we see them. Might be the best way to do it.
perfect.
And our policy analyst here, Jane Demaray, will be following the legislation too, and keeps folks here at WSD updated on that. And my goal is to share that with the board, all legislative items and bill tracking and all of that. So you'll be hearing from me a lot more through the session, so that if you have interest and want to participate. I would assume now, and I don't know, we'll have to see how it goes, I will probably send that out to the full board, depending on what someone's interest may be. And then if that goes to one committee or another, we can coordinate that at the time. But we'll have to try that out. But I will definitely be keeping you all apprised on Jane's bill tracking.
I think that would be great. And Dean, I don't know if you have a different memory than me. Your answer might be no, you haven't been paying attention, Paul. So that's fine. I'll accept it. But when I go back in past years during sessions, I don't remember the SWIB doing anything different than what we did in non-session years in terms of communication, thought, actions. Do you have a different memory of that?
Paul, and I think you're following the same thing, is that a lot of our board members have looked to engage in any opportunity we can to help that as we look at developing those industry relationships and the needs of what we're looking for. In my historic past experience here, we haven't been leveraged in that opportunity to bring forward, that industry perspective that I think governor is really looking for and wanting support, and what our legislators need to be connected with us on.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's, it's super helpful for us to know that, because we can be mindful, and between the governor's office and labor, we can be looking for those opportunities and times that we need your help Or, it'd just be good to have you out there for
Totally.
various reasons. So
That
we'll be
voice,
sure
that
to do that.
perspective, I think is what would be valued by a lot of our board members. I mean, Paul, you're probably same as me. We've seen a lot of good people come and go from this board, but maybe losing that connection of that opportunity, so they seek it elsewhere. I mean, Adam and your guys' cohorts and everything have done a great job, but you've developed that relationship on your own. I think we could be a voice for a lot of other businesses, bringing those same concerns forward as we reach out. So that relationship to not only what we have in our industries but our communities, we have a lot of great perspective that just maybe isn't being leveraged. I truly believe that for sure. So I welcome it. I'm excited to hear that. I know that was as we talked about it at our meeting where Governor came. That was the first time in my tenure on the board to actually have Governor participation.
Yeah.
Well, and I could say from my perspective, I feel like the board wasn't utilized. But, I'm going to be honest, at the first legislative session, I had no idea what I was doing, just learning my department, let alone knowing who even existed for a resource. So now I feel like we're in a much better spot. And I feel like this board has become a priority for the department and the governor's office. So, we definitely want to do it. And if there are things like that we're not doing, please tell us, because, we need that advice.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was really motivated from our last full meeting in Bozeman. I mean, the level of engagement, especially for a board that was newly constituted and a lot of new people at the table, and the newness did not diminish the participation. I mean, it was great to see, and that was an energy that was pretty exciting compared to some of the past boards where it was much more policy approval driven as opposed to action oriented.
Paul, I go back to one of our first meetings when we first joined, and then of the excitement, and then having that tailor off into Adam's comments about controlling your individual committee meetings a little bit. That's excitement, right? Harnessing it and using that, and then leveraging those individuals in the appropriate measures, right? And so I do think the ones that we have built that in warranty. It takes you a little while before you fully understand what's going on here, but I do think that we have those opportunities, Adam, to even with those high engagement members or public members, I guess at that point, to leverage them in the appropriate measures to say, this person brought up a lot of that stuff. Keeping that momentum going, I think, is something that we need to keep sight of in our executive board here. As well.
Probably important on Mary's behalf. Great conversation she brought up. So it wasn't.
I've seen it
I
too.
kind of let it go.
Yeah, I've seen it too. But harnessing that excitement and then leveraging it for their expertise in the appropriate measures, I think it is a tool that this executive board can really bring forward in those right asks, I guess.
Yeah, and even on email communication, I give Mary a lot of credit. She sent emails to the board about opportunities for the SWIB to get involved. If I go back, you didn't really hear anything about a SWIB board from the SWIB board unless it was the week before a meeting. I mean, so it's great to see the dialogue. I guess in the interest of time, I know, Dean, you've got an 11 o'clock hard stop, and we will lose our quorum. So looking at that last agenda item, finalizing the goals, we've talked about the 5 goals, Adam, that on your committee meeting. The other goals we've talked about is the I'm not sure quite licensing. There's a lot of discussion around licensing, but a goal regarding licensing reciprocity, as well as just coordinating with the governor's office as legislative support. Would you be amenable to forwarding those to the full board in Great Falls, as well as Adams? And I'll get to the WHEEL one next, but it may be easier to take them in pieces.
And Chair, I was able to rearrange a few things, so I do have some available time after 11. Okay. Sorry.
let me start over. So we've got the goals from Adam's committee we went over. Is everybody comfortable with those committee goals moving forward in Great Falls? Okay, thank you. As far as I guess I'll jump to the Workforce Policy Committee. We forwarded 2 goals regarding one on licensing reciprocity. Maybe we'll have to define that goals language at that meeting. I don't really know what that would totally look like, but around licensing.
And kind of to one of my earlier points, I think once that conversation, if we do have David come, or once it is legislatively fixed, if and when, it will fix the concern that they have.
Yes. Yep.
But if we want to have a goal of making sure that there's a more streamlined communication of licensing reciprocity, because I think the main point will be, if it is legislatively fixed, how do we make sure everybody knows that?
Yeah.
If that's a kind of correct assumption.
Okay. And then a second goal of coordinating with the governor's office as legislative support, something around that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be comfortable with those 2 goals being added to the list from the policy committee? Okay. Last but not least is the WIOA committee. I think we have 2 goals we talked about. One, I'm not sure this is a goal, Wes, or really just an action item, but maybe it could be a goal because it's going to require their engagement. Including the WIOA committee in the next state plan modification process. Mm-hmm. And 2, trying to use their language, something around develop and analyze or survey or utilize existing surveys and data for business partners. Mm-hmm. Those would be the 2 items from that committee to move forward. Comfortable with those 2 being added to the list. Okay. So that exhausts the topic from my perspective, but is there any further discussion on goals? I'm going to hold you to the 11 o'clock, Dean.
Nobody will argue with you to be off in order.
Thanks, Dean.
So anything else for the good of the order for the meeting? Okay. Well, again, I appreciate everybody making the time this morning. Before I forget, public comment. We've got some people on the line that are outside of the committee. Is there any public comment that anyone would like to raise at this time? Okay. Hearing none, look forward to seeing you all in Great Falls in a couple weeks. And again, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
And Jane, if you're still on, you're welcome to stop recording, please. Jane, are you there?